Hello, I'm Tim Krul. Welcome to Norwich City Central.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Norwich City Central podcast, and welcome to another episode of the Game Changer series. In this series, I talk to people connected to Norwich City and the wider world of football. Delighted to say on episode 6, I was joined by Benjamin Bloom. Had a really good chat with Benjamin, share his story about how he started his YouTube channel and his experiences on YouTube, and also talk about the state of football currently and some questions around the Norwich Ipswich rivalry. I hope you do enjoy.
Hello everybody, Lewis, and welcome back to the Norwich City Central podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Game Changer series. I hope you're all doing well. Delighted to be joined by Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. Yeah, your lockdown beard and hair are a little bit tidier than mine. I've gone for the hair up today, but we are 5 days away from Premier League now. So us content makers can get on and talk about something other than people going to meetings and voting on stuff.
Yeah, it's been a long 3 months, hasn't it, mate? And yeah, during the lockdown, there's kind of been two types of haircuts. The one with lots of hair, probably like ourselves, and then people who've just gone bald. How have you been finding lockdown without the football and without the barbers?
Well, they've just gone Guantanamo Bay, haven't they, and just shaved it all off. If that's not a politically incorrect thing to say, you can delete that out if you want. No, do you know what? My hairdresser, Daryl, who works in Rush in Watford, I'm going to call him out here because I've got him on Instagram, and I DM'd him the other day, and I said, now we can see people. Do you fancy coming over? I said, this is my postcode, and I'll pay you what you need. You travel if you want to charge me per hour for how long you're out. And nah, he wasn't interested. So I'm gonna have to wait another month for a haircut. But no, the lack of football has been desperate, hasn't it? But coming round now.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, we was talking before camera, wasn't we, with the lack of content? But it's good that slowly, football's starting to open, and I think. I saw one of the videos you did, and you did a fantastic song, and you kind of summed up football nicely with football as being the most important, unimportant thing. I think that's a really good way to kind of sum it up.
Yeah, I don't know who said that first, but Jurgen Klopp had nicked it. I'm sure somebody less famous, charismatic, and powerful than Jurgen Klopp had said it, but I thought it was a nice little thing to go in that little song, which you can see obviously by subscribing on YouTube to the Benjamin YouTube channel.
Perfect time. Plug everything away, Benjamin. Go for it.
Twitter at Benjamin Bloom. There you go. That's it now. That's it. No more.
Yeah, go over and subscribe to Benjamin Bloom on the road to 10k subscribers, mate. Well done, mate. Well done.
Yeah. I never like looking at the total because someone said that actually on a stream I just did, and I always think if you're on like, I don't know, 9,900 or whatever, and you say, come on, a few more follows, there'll be loads of people who unsubscribe, won't they? just to spite you, and the number will go downwards. So I just keep it down. Hey, look, as long as, probably the same as you, as long as I'm getting comments and people asking questions and agreeing and disagreeing, then we know we're doing the right thing. The views and the subscribers, well, nice, but you just want that engagement, don't you?
Definitely, yeah. Engagement's really important. We're going to be talking about some questions in general, and of course we're going to be talking about some Norwich and Ipswich questions. I mean, you've kind of become one of the most liked Ipswich fans, and who would have thought that Norwich and Ipswich fans can actually like each other? What a strange world.
Yeah, I don't quite know how that happened, really. I think it stems back to an appearance I did on Talk Norwich City with Jack and Chris, and Chris would admit this, and he said it to me privately. But Jack went in, he was fine, he was the good cop, he could just sit there. But I think Chris went into it wanting to do the whole banter, and and I don't do that. I don't subscribe to football banter, and you can never win football banter because it just is incessant. It just goes on and on and on and on. You can lose every single one of your games in the season, and on that one occasion where you have one up on the other person, you'll see the people going for it. So Chris went for the banter, and the only problem is if you keep a complete poker face like I did and not respond to any of it, the banterous party then all of a sudden looks very silly. And after that appearance, amazingly, I got lots of emails from Norwich fans saying,
"Wow,
we're really proper not tweets and stuff, YouTube comments and things, but actual emails, like letters like they would have been back in the day saying, oh, we're really sorry. You travelled to do that interview before the Derby game or whatever, and Chris was just trying to wind you up, and we're sorry. Me and Chris are absolutely fine. He said afterwards, look, sorry, I misjudged. I thought we were going to go for a more Arsenal fan TV type, back and forth. But no, it's been really good actually, and far be it for me to be some kind of pioneer or whatever. But the way I like to think about it is Ipswich is a great club. Norwich is a great club. Whether the fans or of each club want to admit that, and if they're not capable of admitting that based on a tribal, sometimes petty rivalry, then that's fine. If people want to do the banter thing and the mind the gap and the how many stars and then how many trophies and participants in the UEFA Cup, winners in the UEFA Cup, 2 leagues apart now, or what? If people want to do that, that's fine. But you will never win. No one
100%.
No one will ever win. So I like to respect, Norwich the club, and I love Ipswich the club, and both. The stupid thing is that they're more similar than you'd imagine. They're both relatively small clubs. Obviously, Norwich have done, historically over, say, 10,
20,
12.
20, yeah,
10,
15,
12.
15.
Yeah, going back to sort of 2000. Well, I suppose the 2003. We got promoted in 2003-04, was it, Norwich? Yeah. So Norwich have pretty much had the upper hand since then, haven't they? But, I think people were interested to see the rivalry not turn into just silly slanging and turn into respect. And when I started doing more than just Ipswich games on my channel, off I went to Norwich, and I remember going to do Norwich Fulham, and Fulham were really good. They it was the year they got promoted, and I think they won 2-0.
2-0,
yeah,
I
and outplayed Norwich much better. It was when I think possibly Maddison and Pritchard were both in the team, and they couldn't quite figure out who the guy to go with. Turns out they went with the right guy in the end.
I think we had Houlihan that day as well. I think it was Houlihan, Maddison, and Pritchard.
Oh, you've got a great memory, yeah. But yeah, Steph Johansson scored, and Fulham won. And I remember round the back of the ground, people coming up to me, "Oh, I recognise you, mate. Nice one. How you doing?" And from there, whenever I've gone to Norwich games, been, "Oh, you're that Ipswich guy. How you doing?" Rather than, piss off out of my you long-haired whatever. So it's been really good. The worst one was, though, Lewis. I went along to one, and I was sat there, and I could just see these guys looking at me, and and then they start the whispering, and they did the most childish thing as well. They went, "Ben," and then looked away. I turned around, and they both went, "We got you." He's an Ipswich fan, everyone.
How old were they?
Oh, grown men. Yeah.
Really? Oh, nice.
Grown men. But no, it was all good banter. And funnily enough, I've got seats when I've done a Norwich game as a neutral in the same bit and made friends with them now. So it's I think it's cool. I respect. Norwich have had a lot of great players. They've had some great teams as well, and I've respect for all teams. And if I want to go around being a neutral and getting content, it doesn't do me good to slag them off, really.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, well, this podcast is all about sharing the guest story, and I just wanted to say, Benjamin, just ask you a few questions before we get into the football stuff. How long have you been on YouTube, and kind of what inspired you to start, mate?
I've been on YouTube since the start of the 17-18 season, I think. So that would be 3 years. I was the host of I founded the Blue Monday podcast, which was an Ipswich podcast, and I was the host of that. And I guess we'd done that, 15, 16, yeah. So we'd done that for 2 seasons, and we just wanted to branch out the content. So I'd seen all the YouTube stuff going on with football, and I didn't want to do it myself. I put out an advert, and I said, "Does anybody want to come and do YouTube for us?" And this lad applied, and I phoned him up, and we talked about equipment and whatnot, and fine, great, this is what we're going to do. And then before the season started, he was like, "Oh, I've seen some of the comments people get on YouTube, and I'm not sure it's for me." So I'm like, "Okay, fine, that's big enough of you to admit that it's honest or whatever." And Ipswich had a pre-season friendly at Charlton, and I was like, all right, screw it, I'll do it myself. And I got so lucky, Lewis, because we lost 6-1, and of
Wow.
course there were no Ipswich fans, so the game was a complete train wreck, and there were no Ipswich fans there to see it. Maybe 500, 700 or something like that, because it was London. And I went to the car and made the video, and it, all of a sudden, lots of people are watching this, and from then on it was okay. So I did Ipswich games, and that was all I did. And then I remember talking to Dan from Lions TV. When I started doing branching out a little bit, and the first thing I did was I did other teams so that weren't Ipswich, and that upset Ipswich fans at the time, because it gets tribal and whatnot. And then it was, why don't you do a preview, why don't you do a review, why don't you do a live stream, and it just builds up from there. But absolutely no intention of being a YouTuber whatsoever.
Yes. What inspired the ground hopping then? Is it just a love for football and wanting to go to kind of as many games as you want, because you kind of specialise in the Championship, don't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe myself as a ground hopper. More what you said about just the love of the game. It was I remember I stopped work for Christmas on that 17-18 season. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do a review for another team. And I, again, so lucky. I went to Sheffield Wednesday versus Wolves. Wolves were top and going clear under Nuno. Neves scored from outside the box, and the Wolves fans.
When did he didn't?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that was the first time I'd seen him. I was like, this is not fair. He's too good. He's too good for this league. And so was Folly, and so was Jota, and so was Helder Costa, and and all the Wolves fans were so engaged. And so then you start to realise, sadly, that as much as I love Ipswich, and Ipswich has been big, Ipswich is not big at the moment. It could get back to it, but people are less engaged in Ipswich. And then I realised when a team is winning, the fans really want it. And those Wolves fans, then they all hit subscribe, and okay, you go and do another Wolves game, and then it is the love of football, but you kind of follow what people want, really. And just trying to pick out games and trying to get lucky. And when I'm sat there at 0-0 between whoever, and Villa and Forest are drawing 5-5, and my Forest mates are texting me going, "You are not going to believe this. Joe Lolly's had 3 touches and he scored 4 goals." Do you know what I mean? But, it's been absolutely great. And to go round grounds and people to come up and actually care what I think about their team is so ridiculous, but
that's what
so wonderful.
Yeah, that's what I've always been surprised about, just how many people kind of actually care about kind of your opinion. It's been lovely. What's the best thing about it? Is it the sense of kind of community you've gained from YouTube?
Yeah, and I mean, this will sound very bohemian, but I'm a musician at heart, and I've been a musician for years, and I was in a signed band and went on tours and stuff. It's the creativity. It's the when there was nothing there, making something and people enjoying it. That's it, really. And obviously, I've been on stages and performed and got a massive buzz. But if you do a live stream, you get a bit of a buzz, and you see the numbers going up of the people watching it, and all the questions coming in, and you're firing back. It's just the creativity, I think. And you must have a similar gene in you to be doing it yourself,
Yeah, definitely. I think, and sometimes you can be surprised in terms of when you see the amount of views you get on a video, and you almost forget that that there's hundreds of people actually watching you and caring about you, which is really nice.
Do you ever do that thing where you imagine the people that have viewed your video all lined up, and you think, my God, even if it is only 200, I mean, it could be 10,000 or 20,000 as yours and my channels grow or what have you. But even 200, you talk to musicians in originals bands, how long it takes them to get to play to 200 people, it's a long old slog. So, but yeah, it's the creative outlet, really, I think.
Yeah, and it's the engagement as well what you get from it. You talked about music as well. I've seen, on your channel, you do have a bit of a blend of music and football. Do you prefer that kind of content? Because I love watching it, mate.
I don't know, really. I mean, a friend of mine who's very successful, been on been on TV for years basically. I asked his opinion, and he said, well, okay, why don't you try and mix the two? And honestly, I still haven't managed to figure out a way of doing it, but I've done a few sort of comedy, they're kind of comedy, kind of semi-serious songs. But yeah, I think as I get other musical avenues in my life, which may actually start to happen in a couple of months, I'm probably going to be changing jobs in September, so I'll
Awesome.
maybe do a bit more musical stuff. I don't know really. It's great to hear that you like them, and again, it's so difficult because you can pour your heart and your soul into trying to create something, and if it doesn't quite click at the right time on YouTube, it can sail off into the background. But then the Nottingham Forest silly thing I did for Sabri Lamouchi, all the Forest players were tweeting it. Darren Fletcher, the Forest fan who's on BT, was doing it, and I ended up going on BBC Nottingham to talk about a stupid football song about Sabri Lamouchi, so I don't know. I think I'll keep going, and I must plug a great musician, Norwich fan. Am I allowed to out his name? We'll say it's the Coop and Duck.
Coop and Duck, yeah. He's excellent.
We did a duet, and he is a stunning musician. And amazingly, we'd known each other from way back, both playing in bands, and we did the silly Ipswich Norwich Leagues Apart song, which was great fun. So yeah, it's cool, but I think most of my subscribers want to hear me talk about football, and a smaller portion enjoy the songs. But like yourself, you're just looking for that one thing that everyone loves that might spew out and allow you to maybe go on and accomplish some more things with your channel. So we're all looking for that video, aren't we?
Yeah, that's kind of the magic spot, isn't it, mate? I was going to ask finally, in terms of the topic of talking about yourself and your story on YouTube, do you have a particular goal in mind with YouTube? You say how you didn't kind of have intentions to start. Do you have kind of an end goal or certain goals in a few years' time?
Not specific ones. I probably should make some specific ones, really, but that might change now, actually. I mean, it would be really lovely, and I'm not saying I want to make a ton of money out of it, but if it was one revenue stream that added up to my income, that would be wonderful. Even if it was 1/10 of it or 1/8 of it or whatever,
okay.
then that would be great. But I think consistently putting stuff out, always trying to grow, and just as long as I never get to the point where it's like, I'm stuck. I've done this for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and it doesn't grow, and it's no good. But ever since I've done it, the numbers have always gone up. There's always been more people engaged. So, I'll keep going and see what happens. Yeah.
Same here.
I don't have a specific goal. I mean, and you're to a certain extent just governed by the football industry. I mean, I dare say if I'd been covering Ipswich and what happened to Norwich in 2018-19 happened to Ipswich, I think I'd still just be doing Ipswich, because there would have been that interest and that excitement enough to be able to engage enough people. So you don't know what's going to happen, and I work on the Championship, but we all know the mess financially everything's in, and will there even be a Championship? Will it be a Premier League 2? I don't know what's going to happen. So I think the important thing is just to react, be open-minded, and be flexible with your approach and your content.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and you're definitely right in terms of as you say, sometimes you are governed by the football. As I said, my channel had a really big peak in the 2018-19 season, where, of course, a lot of people were interested in the Norwich City content, and you would have gone to a lot of Norwich City games yourself.
Yeah, why do you think I was there? Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm genuinely like I've said to Jack from Talk Norwich City loads of times. I was at that game in September, and I said on my review, I think both teams will finish in the bottom 6. And then all of a sudden, it's like,
a terrible game, wasn't it?
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like, Norwich have won for a month now. They'll get to mid-table, and then they just kept winning and kept winning and kept winning, and then when they get up to the top, as an Ipswich fan, you're like, they'll falter in a minute. And then I remember the 8-game winning streak, and you
Remember
start
it
to
well.
realise like they're getting promoted. They are not. No, there's no one better than them in the league here, and I'm like, it's just a mind blowing story. So
Yeah.
you know,
It's weird to think that what would have happened if Ipswich maybe won that game with Paul Hurst being given a bit more time, because I remember after that game I think we had the international break and then we had Middlesbrough 2 weeks.
Barker sorted it out. I heard that from the
No one said that.
I heard that from the stands. Yeah, could have been really, really, really different. For both teams, and the other one as well, Lewis. I went to one of the first games when they started winning was at Reading, and I worked down that way, and they put Big Steeperman in the number 10 position, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's not a number 10.
I was going to say, a few days before that Reading game, we had Middlesbrough at home, and that's why we put Steeperman in the number 10. We moved Pookie up front, and then
I've tried to study it to figure out what the hell happened. And then also I remember, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I remember Buendia in the Ipswich game, and I'm like, nah, he's not ready yet. He was getting bumped about, and then I remember him. No, I'm pretty sure he did play in the Reading game, because I remember thinking, oh no, he's starting to get this now, and you can kind of see. And then, as my subscribers will know, every time I watched Norwich, bloody Vrancic scored. He'd come on for 20 minutes, and there was a point where I'd seen him play about 100 minutes, and he'd scored about 6 goals. It was all of them from outside the box, I think, as well.
He had a ridiculous season. Moving kind of on into the future, and we've got a few questions now. First question, and it's quite a big one. How has the virus affected both clubs? I mean, from a Norwich City perspective, they've come out and said we're going to lose 1.5 million per game, but because Norwich City and we've been quite well run with Stuart Webber, and we've got a lot of cash. We've been quite cash free, and we haven't particularly spent it. Maybe when you look at a team like Aston Villa, so. I think because Norwich City have got a lot of cash, we're kind of in an okay position to deal with it. What about Ipswich? How has the virus kind of affected Ipswich?
I mean, Ipswich were... It's difficult to say, really, because they were on such a poor run going into the virus that, I mean, there's 2 arguments for it. You could say that poor run could have continued and they could have got worse, but most people watching were thinking, well, can't get much worse than this. Surely they're going to pick up. And some of the games at the end were, Southend at home, Bolton at home, Milton Keynes, some of the worst teams in the league they had coming up. So, I mean, there is an argument to say that, well, they would have finished higher than the 11th. I'm not saying they would have finished in the playoffs. There wasn't enough evidence for that. So, I don't know. From a very self-serving, selfish point of view, in terms of a League One club, Ipswich is huge, and compared to a AFC Wimbledon or a Rochdale or whoever, they've got it much better off than those poor guys. And I'm just very concerned that next season we'll have that. I don't know. Pick any club. Accrington Stanley will say, okay, in order for the club to survive, we're breaking all the contracts. We're going to sign some 17-year-olds for 150 quid a week, and we'll get relegated, but the club will survive, and we'll score 11 points all season, and it will just be a bit of a freak show. So for clubs like Ipswich and Pompey and Sunderland and Oxford, and there's it's the weird thing about League One, Lewis, is you've got a mix of kind of championship sized clubs, and then you've basically got lower League Two 5,000. I mean, I know Burton have been, Norwich will have had plenty of hard games against Burton, won't they? But
definitely won there.
Yeah, but look at it. It's a tiny club next to Derby, who pinch all their good players, and Forest, and they're completely different animals to an Ipswich or a Norwich, or and I'm sure most Ipswich and Norwich fans would admit even a Sunderland that can draw 45,000 fans, so it could have gone either way for Ipswich, but Ipswich have had a very poor year. From Norwich, you would hope that it's other than the financial thing, from a purely competitive point of view, if Closer can come back and there's some more time to train, and they can probably have a better run at the last fixtures than if they'd just continued right through. But I do totally take your point that you get promoted, you get that holy grail of 100 million quid TV money, and then all of a sudden, worldwide pandemic and no one in the grounds, and you're going to lose money. So, and they've obviously got to give under the rebate some of it back as well. Far be it for me to feel sorry for Norwich, but for Norwich, Villa and Sheffield United. I suppose Sheffield United are going to finish so high up that it probably doesn't matter.
Extraordinary season.
But yeah, you do feel from a little bit that they got to the Holy Grail, and it wasn't what it was sold to be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the worst thing as well, obviously, the seasons have finished in League One and League Two. So Ipswich, I think they finished 11th place, didn't they? And obviously going to have to rebuild for next year. However the league's going to look. In Norwich's case, I mean, we're 6 points off safety, but our next home games are against Southampton and Everton, two mid-table teams who you would say haven't got a lot to play for. Everton, I think Everton are playing on the Monday on the Merseyside derby, and we're playing them on the Wednesday, so they haven't got a lot to prepare. So it's the kind of hope that kind of kills you.
But you know how it is, the teams down the bottom. I mean, we had a really weird thing in the Championship where they all started winning at the same time, and I always say 7 points in 4 games when you're in the bottom 3, and you move. So if I mean, I don't know what the league table says, but I would assume Norwich don't have any more than 1.1 or 1.2 points per game or something. If you can crank that up for 3 or 4 games in a row, then stranger things have happened. And I mean, you watch Norwich, they're a good side. They may not be ready for to cope with some of these Premier League teams, but the pattern of play is still as lovely as it was last season. So yeah, maybe in a few dead rubbers they'll pass some teams off the pitch. We'll see. No,
it's certainly going to be really interesting. But yeah, kind of touching on that other point, another question we got in is, how is it going to affect smaller clubs? Will we see more Bury situations? I mean, you probably know more so about the football finances than myself. Do you think that's a realistic possibility?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, so it depends on a few things. One, it depends on when fans come back, because there's and I mean, what we're seeing now with Project Restart proves that in the Premier League, as much as none of us want to hear it, the fans don't matter. They can literally close the stadiums and play on. They don't need them in there. Okay, it's tricky, but we all know it's the TV money that pays it. Then in the Championship, you've got those teams that and it's been a big bugbear of mine, and Norwich have benefited greatly from the parachute payments over the last sort of 6 or 7 years. Obviously earned, but you've got that factor in there, and then you've got that door up to the Premier League. So they've kept going. When you go a bit further down, and I'll mention the same teams: Rochdale, Accrington, Southend, AFC Wimbledon particularly. It's a tiny attendance. They would draw. They just can't continue without fans in the ground. And I suppose to make a YouTube analogy to you and I, it'd be like us making videos, but no one could see them. It'd be like, well, how can we continue? There's nothing coming back. So it is a possibility, and there's a few close. Sadly, and Ipswich did fall victim to this when the ITV digital thing happened in 2002, and I think there was 13 teams. I could be wrong about that, but there was a lot of teams went into administration in the same seasons, and I called it a freak show. You just get these weird seasons where you got 2 teams at the bottom with minus 70 goal difference and 11 points or something, and that would be a shame. But I would rather that, and they played the youth teams, than we lost teams. But no, it's a distinct possibility, and it's all dependent on how quickly and how many fans we can get back in the ground.
Yeah, definitely, that's the thing. And obviously it's the uncertainty as well with not knowing when. The clubs can't really prepare for how they're going to be able to deal with it, which is a real worry.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think the Hungarians, they did a cup final last week, and they opened the bottom tier, And
Okay.
look, I think the second that they can get 10 fans, 50 fans, 100 fans in the ground, they're going in. They're going, even if it's something ludicrous, like I'm trying to imagine the Norwich Stadium where, where they open the top tier of the stands behind the goals or what have you, and you can sit someone every third seat, every third row, and there's 200 people in the ground. Why would you not do that and start to bring people back in? And what they talked about with the Premier League players, and obviously I know there's big infrastructure around that, is you get this biological passport. And someone said in one of my streams, let the fans who've got a biological passport, let them come into the ground. If they're proven to be free of COVID, let them in, for God's sake.
Yeah.
This is the thing that everyone, when we're very scared about this, but if nobody in the room has the virus, nobody can catch the virus. I'm not playing down how dangerous it is, Lewis, but that's the truth
totally
of it.
Right.
And I think as well, fans don't like it, but hospitality boxes, get them open. Do you know what I mean? With 5 people in there or what have you. Delia's whatever kitchen, the thing on the corner or what have you. So but obviously Rochdale don't have what Norwich or Ipswich has in terms of hospitality and glass boxes and
Could you imagine how much a club like Leeds could charge if they're that promotion just to get a few hospitality boxes? There'd be Leeds fans spending thousands, weren't there?
Oh, a Leeds fan would spend. I'm not exaggerating. Would spend 10 grand on a ticket. A wealthy Leeds fan for the home game where they could win promotion. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on, Christian asks, could salary caps be implemented or should they be implemented?
Possibly, yeah. My friend and yours, Simon Jordan, has been, ramming this one home. He says the clubs, look, a salary cap says the clubs kind of can't be trusted because in a free market they take too many risks and. The Reading owners will sell the ground to themselves and then the training ground to themselves and then still pay 30 grand a week for George Puskas or whoever it is in there. The difficulty, I think, is how far do you go? Because are you going to go and tell the top Premier League clubs that they can't go and compete for whoever the top player in the world is in 5 years, Haaland or Mbappe or whoever, and Man City want to get him, and they will pay him 15 million quid a year, and are you going to tell them no, you can't because of the salary cap? And then there's another country who doesn't have a salary cap, and off he goes over there. So I think they can afford it though because of the money they're drawing in from the Champions League. But I suppose further down the league, it maybe it would help. Would it ruin competition? And the comparison always gets made to the NFL, and the salary cap and the socialist nature of the NFL works because they don't have any relegations. And
there you go.
Do you want a situation where your Norwich gets relegated out of the top league and boom, the doors close? You're not coming back in.
That's the situation. There's always going to be when you have these situations. There's always going to be clubs who are going to suffer and clubs who are going to gain from it. I think that's almost like any disaster though. If you look in history or any kind of context, there's always going to be some people who suffer and some who kind of make an advantage out of it. So it's kind of trying to implement a system that is fair, but also trying to implement a system where look, obviously the virus is very deadly, but you need to be able to, if clubs go under, you lose that sense of community, and it could have a far much more worse effect. You look at Bury and now them going. So you need to find a way to I guess implement a fair system.
But Lewis, you've just hit the nail on the head though. What's fair to one team, and we've seen it with the League One voting, what's fair to one team is the opposite to another. You've got Peterborough saying if we don't play on, we lose a ton of money, and then you've got Accrington saying if we do play on, we'll lose a ton of money. It's so all over the place with size of club and income and fan base and all of those things adding up that it would just feel very tricky. Maybe it's the sort of thing that needs to be put in lower down. And I mean, they've talked about, I forget what the figures were, maybe $3.5 grand in League One, was it, per week, and 1,800 or £2,100 in it's difficult. It's really hard to tell a very driven, very talented individual in a very, very difficult, alpha male industry that you can't make any more than this. And then we've already spoken about people circumventing it. All they're going to do is backload the contracts, and it's going to be a house for their mum, or and all.
Exactly.
They'll find a workaround. Oh, we'll stick it in a bond for this charitable foundation that you've just
magically
launched,
set up.
or magically set up when we were interested in you. They'll find a way, but maybe it'll help. Someone said, just to finish on this, Lewis, someone said hilariously in one of my comments on a video, championship clubs asking for a salary cap is like an obese child asking Tesco's to take the sugary foods off the shelf.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's not Tesco's. It's your responsibility not to eat the stuff, not theirs, not to flog it to you, because you can't control your intake of it. No, and I'm not having a pop at obesity or anything. It's just an analogy. We have to watch ourselves on YouTube, don't we, Lewis?
Yeah. Well, particularly with certainly a lot of people having to come back and apologise for things. But that's a really, really good metaphor. I kind of agree with that. A few more questions now. Josh asks, what are your thoughts on Paul Lambert before he was appointed and now after? I mean, Paul Lambert is that kind of commonality between Ipswich and Norwich, and it's gone very different ways, hasn't it?
So before he signed, I thought this is probably the best guy we can get, and I was ready to make excuses for him that Randy Lerner was disinterested at Villa, and he came to Stoke too late, and he had Venky's at Blackburn, and then you realise, am I kidding myself making all these excuses? And then what was the other club? Wolves. He was there, and then Fosun came.
There's quite a lot of clubs, weren't there?
Yeah, and you could kind of make excuses for a lot of the clubs, and we kind of looked and we thought, oh, if you get anything like the Paul Lambert that Norwich had in 2009, happy days, because he was amazing for you. And I would argue, and I'm not trying to wind up Norwich fans here, probably, I know Dave Stringer was incredible, Mike Walker did great things, but for where Norwich were when he walked in the door, he's probably the most important figure in Norwich's history in the last, him and James Maddison probably now, in the last 20 years. He really dragged them up by their bootstraps.
Yeah, because Paul Lambert came in, I think, in August time. We just lost 7-1 to Colchester. Paul Lambert was the manager of Colchester that day. So he comes in, I think we're bottom of League One, and then obviously win the League One title, get promoted from the Championship, and then finish 12th in the Premier League comfortably as well. It was the most amount of points we've got in the Premier League since the season we finished third. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that stat. Yeah. No, he was incredible for you. Sadly for us, and I really hope to be proved wrong about this, but I've seen no evidence that he's that same guy, sadly. There's a lot of people who are suspicious now, because he came in and the relegation season, he got this strange free pass that McCarthy had been there, and it was fairly obvious that the recruitment Paul Hurst did was just terrible. He basically sold all the best players, replaced them with substandard versions. No offense to the players he signed, but they weren't Waghorn, Webster, Garner, Selina, all of these guys that went, McGoldrick, who are now mysteriously all playing at a much higher level than bottom of League One, put it that way. But he seemed to get this free pass that seemed to last a long, long time, and there wasn't much of a change in the relegation season, but there was always this sense of, he's rebuilding the bridges that McCarthy burned with the fans, and it was Paul Hurst, bad recruitment, and he's got no players basically, and we're done. And then when you go into League One and you're Ipswich in League One, and don't get me wrong, I've got no arrogance about being an Ipswich fan, but come on, it's League One. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You should be able to finish in the top 6 if you're a competent manager in League One, and you've had the previous season, and it's your squad. And I've not I've not seen the evidence on the pitch to say, and I really hope I'm proved wrong. I really hope he comes back next season and everything's together and it's his squad and they get some momentum and they're promoted. But I haven't seen anything to,
because you were saying even when
that'll happen.
Yeah, because you were saying even when you were top of League One, there was never really thought that kind of run would continue. Or
that's me personally. That honestly, that's not me being wise after the event. I can point you to a Blue Monday podcast after we beat Shrewsbury 3-0 where I said I don't get it. We won 3-0. We gave away a load of chances. The other team had a guy sent off. We scored a couple of quick counter-attack goals at the start, and then we scored another one against 10 men. We're top of the league. We're winning every week, but I don't think we're very good. I wasn't trying to be edgy or contrarian or whatever, but I never saw, and bear in mind, I watched 78 championship games the previous season, and there were Norwich, Leeds, Sheffield United, and Villa all in one season were all very, very good teams. So I knew what a good football team looked like at championship-ish level. And no, no, all the good things I've seen from these teams, in terms of their shape and, how they manage a game, what individuals do, how they progress the ball, strikers, the type of chances they create, defending. I know what a good football team looks like outside of the Premier League, and I haven't seen it yet, Lewis. And for God's sake, best times I had in my life were in the late 90s watching Ipswich take the piss and beat everybody for 4 or 5 years and then finish 5th in the Premier League. I want it, but
of course.
I'm not going to lie if I'm not seeing it, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with Farke as well, yes, obviously there was a few people who were sceptical of Farke, and it's very, as you say, it's very easy to say things in hindsight, but there was always this kind of philosophy, and although it didn't particularly work, you could see Farke was trying to bring through the youngsters. We had Jamal Lewis, Max Aarons, obviously the sale of James Maddison, the Murphy that season kind of kept us afloat. So there was always promising signs for Farke, and I think signs that he was going to be given an opportunity to kind of, show what he's all about. But as you say with Lampert, if there's not really this kind of philosophy, it's just very hard to pinpoint why it hasn't kind of really worked out for Lampert, I think.
Yeah, quite. And it comes down to pattern of play for me, and a plan that's been developed. And by the way, this comment applies to not just people judging a Norwich team in 2018-19. It applies to anything in your life. I do not begrudge anybody who makes a position and then there's a massive change in the information and they change their position, because I'm sorry, everyone who saw Norwich for the first 6-8 games of 2018-19, it would not have been a stupid thing to say this team will not be promoted, for God's sake, right. Definitely, not be promoted. So, I wouldn't even blame any Norwich fans for questioning Farke, because the fact of, and this was what was so bewildering to Ipswich fans, the fact of all of those things clicking pretty much all within the period of about 2 months of.
So lucky. Well, it wasn't luck. I guess it was.
No, I know. Norwich fans get very salty if you say anything about luck, but sometimes your circumstances have to work in your favour. And even stupid things like in that Ipswich game, it was Max Aaron's debut, and one of your centre halves got hurt as well. So you got to see Godfrey, Aarons, and Lewis completely by chance, and then all of a sudden they're totally bossing it, and all of these things, like you say, and then you move the little scruffy Finnish guy up front and he doesn't miss for the rest of the season. You put the big lumbering German in at 10 and he looks like Riquelme or something.
Exactly. You can't write it, can you?
No, it was incredible, and some very good practice and a bit of good luck, and both things help each other. What was the golfer who said, the more I practice, the luckier I get?
That's a good way to sum it up.
I think it's like that, but I don't begrudge anybody changing their mind. And look, if Ipswich are kicking backsides next year, I'll come back on your podcast and I'll say, nope, he's given me the evidence now that he knows what he's doing. They look great. They're playing brilliantly, and I'm convinced he can do the job now. But I need to see it first.
Yeah, but also in this age of social media, it's kind of like if you have an opinion with one thing, you've kind of got to stick with it. And I'm just like, I can change my opinion based upon what I observe.
Not on social media, you can't. Someone will drag up a tweet from 3 years ago and say, "Oh, Lewis, you once said that this guy was better than this guy, therefore you must go straight to hell and be deplatformed." And social media is a lot of screaming and not a lot of listening, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One final question to kind of round up the podcast, Ben. Favourite and worst Derby Day moments. So, of course, for my kind of 10, 15 years supporting Norwich, I mean, Norwich have obviously got the better of Ipswich in the Derby. Obviously, you've supported Ipswich a little bit longer and you've kind of been following the Derbies longer. Have you had any favourite moments?
Oh, God, so many. I mean, I'll start by saying I hate the games. Absolutely hate it. Honestly, I feel sick to my stomach on the day, when it starts. And, if you want to drive an Ipswich fan mad, you play that that is torture. It drives
me mad.
But you can imagine being an Ipswich fan and you've heard it so many damn times.
Well, even going into the game in February, which was probably my favourite moment, beating Ipswich 3-0, obviously the Pookie brace. We were going into I think we was going into the game second because Sheffield United had won the day before, but I was still going into the game nervous. And Norwich is second and Ipswich are bottom.
I remember trying to tell people before that game, I've watched both teams a lot. You are not going to, you can believe me, you are not going to lose this game. But then still, there's always that part of you that goes, Derby Day, you never know what can happen. Look, there's been some brilliant ones. Obviously, the 5-0 in 97, I think, or 98 was absolutely incredible. But then that was followed by the next one at Portman Road. Craig Bellamy scored and Norwich won 1-0. So totally back and forth. I remember feeling so down the season we got promoted and won the playoffs. Brian Hamilton had been at Ipswich and he was caretaker manager for Norwich. And
what year was that? Was that 2000?
It's 2000. And Ewan Roberts, watch the goal. I'm sorry, scores the luckiest deflected goal. And this seems to be the pattern at Portman Road, that Ipswich will do something. Norwich will go near the Ipswich goal once in the first 25 minutes and score even if it's Luke Chadwick, Ewan Roberts, Cameron Jerome, whoever, Lewis Graben. I can reel them all off. Leon McKenzie, Darren Huckabee.
2 yards offside.
Graben was offside, for sure, wasn't he? And Jonathan Douglas in 15-16 was onside and scored, and VAR would have had that one. That was depressing. And I must say, Robert's second goal was brilliant in that game. But yeah, it just felt like we would always just get too nervous. Obviously, the Tim Closer goal was just the most sickening. If you've been there and it's coming up 9 years, 10 years or whatever. By the way, I don't endorse that. It should be the number of games, because obviously there was 5 years in the 2010s where we were in different divisions and didn't even play. But
I think Southampton and Portsmouth, their derby, they hadn't played in for like 8 years, and whoever won that derby, they could say they've had the decade of
in 8 years. There you go. But no, I'm not going to deny that Norwich are completely bossing the derbies at the moment. So probably the 5-0 is the big one. Alex Maffey hat-trick, Bobby Petter 2 should have been missed. We missed 2 1-on-1s in the first half as well. And I've spoken to David Johnson about it as well. He was like, I should have scored a hat-trick in that game as well as Alex Maffey did. And Andy Marshall was hopeless as well. And then we ended up signing him a couple of years later, and he was dreadful for us. Interestingly, in the game I mentioned where Ewan Roberts scored, he was outstanding for Norwich, which boggles my mind.
I didn't see it, but what was the game where I think it was Brian Gunn had the famous miss kick at
I was
Portman
there.
Road?
I was there. Yeah. It was always.
Did you win that game? Or
we won 2-1. So Ian Marshall scored in the first half, and Jamie Curran, who was probably 18 or 19, and we'd all heard about him. And God, that guy should have played for England. Jesus, if he'd had his head screwed on, what a finisher he was. He dyed his hair green, and you see him warming up, and you're like, oh, this
He's gonna
guy,
score.
this guy fancies it. On he comes, and he scored. It's a good goal as well. No, I always felt slightly badly because Brian Gunn had the tragedy with his daughter dying, and I'd heard some chants that I didn't like, and I don't know. I always felt a bit of sympathy for Brian Gunn from that personal reason, and that I'd heard the chants. But it was incredible. Like most people in the ground, it was one of those, what, the ball's in the goal, and what the hell just happened. But I try not to live by Schadenfreude and enjoying other people's misfortunes. But yeah, I was there. Robert Ullathorne, own goal. Yeah, that was 96. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think for me it's probably the game last season, just because of how magical that season was for us, or the 5-1 win at Portman Road, or I mean, I'm thinking of so many good memories here. The playoff, the playoff semi-final as well. But I think in that 5-1 win at Portman Road, I think Jimmy Bullard probably scored one of the best Derby Day goals.
Underrated Derby goals, that one. Yeah. Fortunately, I had tickets for that game, and I got scooted off on a tour, and I was in Northern Ireland, getting texts from people, another goal.
Oh,
But yeah, it was horrible. Yeah. But that we talk about that slide indoors and Paul Lambert and that crossover that season, and straight through you going. That's the one thing us Ipswich fans grudgingly admire Norwich for, is they get one chance, one good season, and they do it. They're ruthless. They go. Whereas Ipswich will fail gloriously in the playoffs over and over again. Whereas Norwich have seemed to have had that DNA, particularly for the last 15 years, which is a good thing, of being ruthless. And that manager's not doing good. Get him out. Get someone in. That chief exec at Huddersfield is really good. Hire his wife and then get him in. Do you know what I mean? And it's not a bad quality to be ruthless.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good point there. Finally, Benjamin, what does football and sport mean to you, mate?
Oh, I love it. It's great. It means some of my best memories. And I think a lot of, sort of males, not wanting to sound sexist, but there's this rite of passage of going to the football with your father or what have you, and you take on, you end up supporting your local team or the team he supports or what have you. And, I think a lot of guys that follow football have that moment where your mum says you can go to an away game on the bus with your mates. It's the first independence you get. It's the first time, you learn about life through football. You learn about highs and lows and winning and losing. You learn about violence. You learn about how to keep your nose clean. I do genuinely think in England football is a big rite of passage. For young women as well, but particularly for young men. You
100%.
You learn about life through it. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, Benjamin. Have you got any final words to say regards football? Plug yourself. Just go for it.
Yeah. The channel obviously is Benjamin Bloom. We focus on championship stuff, and without being cantankerous, if Norwich were to be relegated, I will see you guys next season and subscribe subscribe to the channel, because you will get balanced content from me. And I do happen to think that if Norwich are relegated and they keep any four of Buendia, Pookie, Webber, Farker or Aarons, I think they're going to score over 85 points. So I think you might have a nice fun season next season if you can keep those people in the club. But no, hit subscribe, ring the bell, Twitter at Benjamin Bloom. And if you're a Norwich fan as well, if you don't mind me plugging a rival channel, obviously I'm good mates with Jack Reeve from Talk Norwich City, and we've been doing a lot of collaborating. So
enjoying them.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, we try to bridge the divide. I know Jack can be a bit more of a wind up to the Ipswich fans than I can be
to get Chris on then.
To the Norwich fans. Well, as I always say, I'm willing to chat football and debate with anybody. All I would say is just be careful because you might lose.
There we go. That's a great way to sum it up, guys. If you did enjoy,
No.
please...
I love you, Chris, and I don't mean that.
You sure? If you guys did enjoy, please like and subscribe and follow on Spotify as well. And we'll see you later.